Hi. Okay, so tonight I want to talk about this book. It's called Au Château d'Argol. I don't know the name in English. I forgot to look for it. But it's probably easily findable on the internet. Julien Gracq is interesting because I wanted to talk about him because he's a guy I've been wanting to read for a while. So you probably don't know that, but I'm an English teacher, and when I took my English certification exam, I had a translation test, and one of the texts was on him. We were supposed to translate from French to English, and um, and as I was reading the text for the translation, even in spite of the stress I was feeling or like the rush needing to go fast and to make all those connections and to just translate the text. I was I was attracted to that to the imagery, to the complexity of the language in a way. He's not an easy writer. He's even what you could call a writer's writer, um, to some extent, I guess. And but I don't really like this expression because it just means that it feels a little bit condescending towards readers or other authors or something like that. But it's pretty useful because it definitely sums up the kind of guy he was. Um, he started writing, I think he was born in 1910, I think, and died in 2007. So his life and career spanned the 20th century, but he started writing in the 40s. At least this book is from the 40s or late 30s, and right from the get-go, he talks about two influences that were important for him, namely the Surrealist movement and also Gothic stories. He mentions by name Anne Radcliffe, Horace Walpole, and Edgar Poe. So I don't really know Radcliffe or Walpole's work. I just know it by because I heard about it or read about it. But I do know Poe's, and I really enjoy Poe's work, especially since it's not really like the typical. I mean, it's a type of Gothic that is very conscious of what it's doing itself, and so there's a lot of humor, dark humor, and distance regarding where the stories go, what they deal with, what they talk about, and it's also really verbose and uses a lot of precise, complex adjectives. And one of the striking features of Grac's work is that he does the same thing, but in a different way. So yeah, yeah, so he was into realism, but at the same time, in the 40s, surrealism, I said realism, I mean surrealism. At the same time, in the 40s, surrealism was already waning, it was already on the way out. So so then it's kind of interesting for an author to draw back two of the main um, try to link back to two great literary movements, both of which, I mean, Gothic is still a thing today. It's established, but it's not a new thing, and neither was Surrealism. However, at the time, there was the World War II going on. There was the beginning of Jean-Paul Sartre's existentialism movement. There was a lot of political literature, or so so really like positioning for oneself to position like this at the time is it was kind of strange, and also it highlights the um, the individualism part of the guy, the very um, make his own make his own way kind of guy that he was as a writer. As a person, very little is known about him. Is It was quite a private guy, so I don't think there's too much going on his life. I know that on his love life, there's barely anything, and so yeah, he was a guy who wanted to do his own thing, work, um, uh, and write with themes with a style that he wanted to go deeper into. So now the book in itself, the story. The story is pretty simple. It's called the Au Château d'Argol, so in English would be To the Argol Castle. So from the get-go, the title is pretty thematic and I guess relates to the Gothic genre. Okay, there is always a story in a castle, that kind of thing. However, here it's a little different because it's not a castle that belongs to an old family. It's a youngish guy who came into money and who decided to read a lot of Hegel. And so Hegel in philosophy, in the history of philosophy, I'm not a specialist of philosophy. I just read about that as I was doing a little bit of research on Hegel, just to understand a little bit more precisely what it was about. But Hegel basically was a materialist philosopher, which means that he aimed at describing and explaining the world around based on tangible, um, at least a reasoning that would be logical and tangible proof to be able to explain everything. So there's definitely no mysticism and no beliefs whatsoever. So what is interesting is that here we can definitely see right from the get-go um, um, a trope from Gothic fiction, which means the person who doesn't believe like the scientific-minded person who wants to launch into a scientific quest, and we know that it's not gonna happen quite like that. So then that young guy buys. It doesn't work. I don't know what he does, but sorry, I don't know what he does, but it doesn't work. He wants to go to Brittany, that's in western France, at the westernmost point in France, which it's really beautiful. The landscapes are amazing. By the sea, there's a lot of rocky formations. It's a very um, very rough landscape and very beautiful. Really gray, really dark. So perfect, the perfect setting for that kind of story. Um, but um, so yeah, and this guy is waiting. Has invited one of his friends, who's called Herminia, to join him there, and Herminia is presented as the polar opposite of the main guy, which is funny because it's reminiscent of Hegel's theory of the material dialectism, which means the reasoning part is you have a thesis, an antithesis, and then you try to go beyond this paradox, the problem that is posed between the two. And so this guy comes, and of course, he brings along his girlfriend to set up a nice, typical love triangle. One thing though is that, as you can see, the book is pretty thin. Okay, even the way it's written, there's not much text. So, which means one thing is that it's suspense has no part in this book. Everything is known from the beginning, and it's more a book, thematic book. What I mean by thematic is it deals with the stereotypes, with tropes, cliches, things that have been done before, as he announced in the preface when he talked about Walpole, Radcliffe, and Poe. And so here his goal is less to tell an interesting story. It is interesting, but it's or at least not relying on cliffhangers and suspense and all that kind of thing, but more so to offer a series of panels. It's kind of like it has a very visual style. So I think he has a very painterly style, and I really enjoyed that. Painterly in the sense also that he plays, like I said, with structural elements, so it feels a little bit abstract when I talk about this just like that. But at the same time, he gives flesh to those structural elements, which gives a narrative that is really dynamic, really strong, really powerful, but in the moment. Okay, we're not reading through the steps to get to the end. When you read and you're focused on the passage you're reading, it's really rich and deep. So yeah, so that's why I chose the extract I want to talk about today. So last time I had chosen two extracts, but then the video was a little bit long. Now I don't want to do something that long. I think it was 40 minutes, something like that. So I'm going to read the extract and then I'm going to look at it sentence by sentence. All right, I'll read it in French. Yeah, I'm sorry. If you don't speak very good French, it's uh it's okay. Um, um, you can still find the book, and I'd be interested to see actually how this was translated because it doesn't look very easy to translate. Okay, so I'll jump to it. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention. So here, for example, another thing that looks like a series of panels is the chapters are so it's like this. You reach the end, and then you get here. So you have like a full page separation. And here the title of the chapter is either a character's name, like a portrait, or so here is Haide, La Chapelle des Abîmes. Um, that's a place name, so it could be like a landscape. Or where is it? Yes. So the passage we're going to study, wait, yes, is part of the chapter Le Bain. And this is more a scene, and even typical scene. You know, bathers' scenes in paintings are or have been um, a subgenre in themselves for I don't know, uh, at least a couple of hundreds of years. Yeah. Anyway, so here is a bath scene. In the bath scene, it involves the three characters, and the three characters are swimming towards. They're swimming towards the. In French, we say le large, the horizon. Okay, they're swimming there, and basically they don't talk. They're not talking to each other. They are looking at each other, and they understand that what they're going to do is they're basically swimming as far as they can despite getting more and more tired and starting to swallow water and to maybe risk drowning. Okay, but they keep going. It's like an unspoken pact, that kind of thing. So here, thematically speaking, we're really deep into the Gothic genre because there's the love triangle, physical love, some sort of erotism, because it's not explicitly said, but you can imagine that the three of them are naked, or at least they have like um, just panties on, and it's set in the 40s, so nakedness was probably I assume it would be interesting to know because we always picture people from um, like previous decades being more prude, but actually I've seen pictures from the 30s in the US or the 40s, and people were um, uh, pretty naked around beaches, and I'm thinking it was probably the same here in France. Like nakedness was probably frowned upon if you went out in public or something like that, but maybe in more private setting, it was probably more okay. So something not to talk about, but something that people did. Because yeah, one thing also um, that is that needs to be thought about um, is the fact that back in the day, the public sphere or the sphere of information and all that kind of thing was not like today. There's been a transition. You could do something sort of public, but in, and it still be private. Whereas today things become public really quickly. Anyway, I don't know where I'm going with that. So let's go. I'm going to read the whole passage. Ils nagèrent tous les trois vers le large. Couchés au ras de l'eau, ils voyaient accourir de l'horizon le poids régulier des vagues. Et dans un capiteux vertige, il leur semblait qu'il tomba tout entier sur leurs épaules et dut les écraser. Avant de se faire au-dessous d'eux un flux de silence et de douceur qui les élevait paresseusement sur un dos liquide, avec une sensation exquise de légèreté. Tantôt la crête d'une vague projetait une ombre brusque sur le visage de Heide, tantôt reparaissait l'étincellement salin de ses joues lavées. Il leur sembla que leurs muscles participaient peu à peu du pouvoir dissolvant de l'élément qui les portait. Leur chair parut perdre de sa densité, et s'identifier par une osmose obscure au filet liquide qui les enserrait. Ils sentaient naître en eux une pureté, une liberté sans égale. Ils souriaient tous les trois, d'un sourire inconnu aux hommes en affrontant l'horizon incalculable. Ils allaient vers le large. Il leur semblait tant de vagues déjà avaient roulé sous eux, tant ils avaient franchi de ces crêtes brusques et oppressantes, derrière lesquelles se révélait à nouveau toute l'aridité des plaines consacrées au seul soleil. Que la terre déjà derrière eux avait dû disparaître au regard, les abandonnant au milieu des vagues à leur prestigieuse migration, à laquelle ils s'encourageaient l'un l'autre par des cris exaltants. Et il semblait à Albert que l'eau véritablement coula sous eux, à une incomparable vitesse, et dut déborder ces tristes rivages. Tandis qu'il poursuivait avec ses compagnons de route une navigation dont s'imposait de plus en plus à son esprit le caractère enchanté, ils allaient toujours plus avant, à une vitesse qui leur paraissait sans cesse accrue. Un cinglant défi apparaissait dans leurs yeux, se fortifier de la poursuite de cette course sans but. Encore quelques minutes, et avec la conscience du long chemin déjà parcouru, s'affermit dans leurs pensées une conviction glaçante. Il sembla à tous trois, au même moment que maintenant ils n'oseraient plus se retourner ni regarder vers la terre. Une conjuration lia dans un regard leurs corps et leurs esprits. À chacun d'eux, il sembla voir dans les prunelles de ce défi mortel. Sentir que les deux autres l'emportassent de tout l'effort de leur corps, de toute leur volonté, vers le large plus avant, vers des espaces inconnus, vers un gouffre d'où nul retour ne serait plus possible, et qu'aucun ne se méprit au caractère insidieux de ce brusque accord de leur volonté et de leur destin. Il n'était plus possible de reculer. All right. So, yeah. So to begin, I just want to say, what did I want to say? I'm just going to get started with the line by line analysis. So there's this one sentence that is definitely interesting. Couché au ras de l'eau, ils voyaient, accourir de l'horizon, le poids régulier des vagues. Et dans un capiteux vertige, il leur semblait qu'il tomba tout entier sur leurs épaules et dut les écraser avant de se faire au-dessous d'eux un flux de silence et de douceur qui les élevait paresseusement sur un dos liquide avec une sensation exquise de légèreté. So here there's a play with synesthesia. You know, synesthesia, if you don't know, it's when you combine all the sensations together. Okay. Syn, it means with, and whatever esthesia means is it's related to the senses. So we can see, for example, that in the verb ils voyaient le poids, so they saw the weight of the waves. Here we have a combination of the sight, the sense of sight, and the sense of touch, the weight, and this combination of senses highlights the fact that the experience they're having is total. It's an aesthetic experience, and and so their body is completely connected to the elements, but at the same time, it's connected in a way that is not normal because you can't really see weight. It's pretty obvious. Um, then then it talks about a capiteux vertige. Um, Capiteux, same thing. It's more, it's an adjective that has more to do with taste, and vertige is vertigo. And so there's definitely an element of exhilaration and a feeling of being overwhelmed. And at the same time, this is uh, that's why also I think this book is interesting. Just like Poe's writing is sometimes has a lot of distance and irony. Here, the use of the hyperbole emphasizes the exaggerated nature of what the young people are feeling. They're not kids. Okay, the guy I think is around 20 years old, so they're probably the girl is probably younger. um, I don't remember, but I'm assuming that. And so, um, yes, and so here we see the scene from their perspective. They're young, so inexperienced, and they're experiencing the world in a very overwhelming way, where all the senses are mixed together. I don't know why I did this ridiculous gesture. Um, Sembler, okay. Sembler, and all the verbs are important. Sembler, sorry, tomba, dut les écraser. So here we have the use of the imparfait du subjonctive, imperfect subjunctive. Um, so here, the scene, once again, we're in the minds of young people. So their perception is kind of factual. They're looking, their experience. What I mean by that is that it semblait que quand la vague tomba, dut les écraser. So it seemed like when the wave falls, they should have been crushed. And so here we exist on two different planes. There's the plane of reality, where they feel that something happens. Okay, they're in the waves, but the waves are so big that they feel that they feel the counterfactual. They feel like the possibility of being crushed feels real in some to some extent, or not as real, but real to a degree, just like what they are actually living, and maybe even more to if we if we're in the minds of younger people who are being um, getting like sensitive overload, actually their senses are being um, uh, used or activated deeply. Um, and then so and then also we can talk about the there's some sort of alliterations. For example, silence, silence, douceur, élevé paresseusement. sensation exquise de légèreté. So the play on the S's, the L's, and the L's are liquid consonants, and we're in a liquid element. So, and the S suggests a sensation of touch. Okay. And also there's a rhyme on exquise and liquid. So here the rhyme, like the liquid element is linked phonetically with the exquisite with this its exquisiteness. So here we can see that the kids are in the waves, they are playing, but there is danger, but the danger is not really dangerous. Okay, it's a safe environment, and that's typical of kids playing and trying to scare themselves. Okay, trying to make and I say kids, but I mean young people, or we could say it could apply to, I think, um, anybody who relies on their senses, I guess. Then further, a little bit further, there's another sentence where the game becomes more serious. Okay, it's no longer like a controlled danger or a danger that is can be easily um, um, controlled, or at least um, that is not very threatening. To play with death. Encore quelques minutes, et avec la conscience du long chemin déjà parcouru, s'affermit dans leurs pensées une conviction glaçante. Yes. So here there is paradoxically, and I think that's one of the things that is interesting, is that the language is um, really elaborate, but at the same time it can feel very oral, like a tale, which is also one of the ways that I mean, I guess the preferred ways that narrators talk in Gothic fiction. For example, I know I haven't read it, but Walpole's book, The Castle of Otranto, is um, is a manuscript, a found manuscript, and there's a voice. So the voice of the narrator is the voice of the person telling the story. And here it's not the found manuscript trope, but there's definitely the narratorial voice is telling the reader, is very conscious that it's telling a story. Um, then there's it's elaborate because the the word order is different. Encore quelques minutes et avec la conscience du long chemin déjà parcouru, s'affermit dans leur pensée une conviction glaçante. So here the subject is at the end, and the object is in the beginning. The complement, I don't know how you call that, but the the complement is before the verb, and so there's the order is reversed. So this is to achieve um, really a stereotypical effect of a dramatic effect. And so the game with death is engaged, is staged, and and the last word is glaçant, so you could say chilling. Yes, a chilling conviction. And so this is possible in French, but of course, obviously, it's not possible in English. That would be an interesting thing to check on the translation. Um, and also, yes, so something that is also that contributes to the play with death is the fact that the verb. So the verb is called s'affermir. So s'affermir is it means stiffen. It's a verb that can be used in the active voice, but that has a passive meaning. It's a process that is done by itself. Um, I mean, you could do it yourself, but it's a slightly different meaning. And so it highlights the fact that They're so first of all, what is being stiffened? It's in their mind, a chilling conviction. So in their mind, they look at the distance they've just done and they realize something. So here, I guess we can see the influence of surrealism in the importance of the mind and importance of the subconscious. So so this is where the play with death is interesting because the characters and the way it's written in the and the way it's written in the sentence is that the grammatically the author highlights the fact that um, the mind has and it's a bit of a paradox, almost a physical quality or natural quality of doing things by itself. And affermir, it's also a verb that is very material, and we're talking about the psychological process. And so it highlights the lack of agency, I think, from the characters who find themselves in the water, having swam quite a bit far out in the ocean, and now they realize that they don't have the strength necessary to go back. So all these elements combined um, um, make the characters realize that the game they were playing with death, with the elements, as a can have a tragic ending. And yes, and then that leads me to another sentence. So still in this idea of playing with death. À chacun d'eux, il semble avoir dans les prunelles des autres ce défi mortel. So here, mortal challenge. Sentir que les deux autres l'emportassent de tout l'effort de leur corps, de toute leur volonté. I think I think I cut the sentence at the wrong place, but it doesn't matter. I have some notes. Um, yeah, so here each character is looking at the other character looking at himself. And so the thing is, um, so they understand that they are challenging each other in a mortal quest. Okay, they are going to go no matter what. But they're doing this in silence, which means that here again there's this element, this imbalance or this physical quality. It's two, there's three, so there are three characters. So each is faced with two pairs of eyes looking at him or her if it's the girl. And so so there's this imbalance where again the individual is crushed by by its surrounding. And all of this is mediated by verbs like sembler and sentir, so to seem and to feel. There's a lot, the verb sembler is like at least 8 or 9 times in this little extract. So it's not a direct action, it's mediated by emotions and senses. So it's definitely treacherous, and one should be cautious. So in interpreting what's going on in the heads of the characters. However, the setup of the three characters looking at each other and daring each other without speaking is also interesting because it sets up power relations between the three of them. And ultimately, what is interesting is that the one character that will almost drown is the girl. So here again, there's another trope stereotype of the Gothic genre where the girl, the frail girl, is victim of men. However, where this departs from the trope is that we don't really know which of the two men is the good or the bad. Uh, Yes, and there's also an antithetic parallelism that is interesting. Tout l'effort de leur corps, de toute leur volonté. So here, so a parallelism, it's the same syntactical structure. So for example, all the effort of, okay, all the effort of their body, all the effort of their mind. So we have a parallelism, two similar structures, but the word around which the structure is built is not the same. Is the opposite. So here we have the body and the mind, and so this echoes the idea of Hegel's um, dialectical materialism, where you have the thesis, antithesis, and then it needs to be overcome in a solution, in a process. However, here the solution seems to be death. So it's almost as if wanting to play, or maybe some kind of ironic joke, wanting to maybe criticize the fact that sometimes when people talk about, I mean, when I say people, Hegel, or people who are Hegelian, who believe that everything can be solved in a scientific way. Well, here the author seems to be suggesting that um, sometimes conflict resolves itself in death, and so this idea that you can solve everything or answer all the questions in nature is not possible, or at least it's not possible in the human mind, uh, because that's the one thing that the surrealist as well um, talked about, was the fact, um, in relation with uh, Freudian theories about the subconscious, that knowing oneself is an infinite quest, and it's also especially not scientific. Um, so yeah, so I thought that was interesting. Um, and yeah, which leads me to the next sentence, and that's about the goal. So the goal of all this, and that would be the resolution. That would be the third step in Hegel's um, Hegel's dialectical materialism. Here, the goal is called two things: a prestigious migration, and it's interesting because I mean I knew the sense of prestigious. It's like in English, prestigious, something very famous. However, I came across the original definition for prestigious, which has to do with magic and concealing. It means something that is it's linked to imposture. Um, it's called gilded fame, fake, treacherous. So here their migration means their movement, their trip, and I think there's definitely a wordplay here. Their trip is fake, is treacherous. They are launched into this swimming session without uh, as a dare, but their dare is just fake because they pretend. Each one of them makes the decision to go based on the knowledge that the two others are looking at him. It also calls that bath course sans but. So here, indeed, there is definitely this idea of the conflict, the thesis, antithesis, but there's no end game, there's no goal, and it's just ridiculous. It's just childish playing. It's just childish young people that play in the sea and they take risks for nothing. Um, yes, I don't have any transition for that. Oh, yeah, no, I do actually have a transition for that. Um, I think there's the end is not is not to overcome that. The end is definitely to enjoy the waves and to enjoy the disorientation brought about by the waves. The end is the pleasure in itself, but the pleasure is dangerous because like Freud talked about in his theories. I know it's from him, but I haven't read anything from him. But Freud talked about Eros and Thanatos. So these are two Greek deities who embody love and death. And so here the end goal is to take pleasure, but also to risk death because of that. So I read the last sentence. Um, Ils allaient vers le large, il leur semblait tant de vagues déjà avaient roulé sous eux, tant ils avaient franchi de ces crêtes brusques et oppressantes, derrière lesquelles se révélait à nouveau toute l'aridité des plaines consacrées au seul soleil, que la terre, déjà derrière eux, avait dû disparaître au regard, les abandonnant au milieu des vagues à leur prestigieuse migration, à laquelle ils s'encourageaient l'un l'autre par des cris exaltants. Okay, I understand. I think I mixed up a couple of sentences in my notes. So I already talked about that, but I just want to go over this. Yes, here there is something interesting. I talk about disorientation for the simple thing that the description is really weird. So it's definitely hyperbolic. Okay, c'est crête brusque. So here again, we mix two things. Crête is something very static. It's like a crest. So it's the sharp edge of a mountain usually. So here the waves are like mountains with a sharp edge, but they are called brusque. And brusque is something quick and oppressant. So here we have this idea of the weight and brusque, the movement, the quick movement, derrière lesquels se révélait à nouveau toute l'aridité, behind which was being revealed again all the aridity of the plains consacré, I don't know how to translate that, au seul soleil. Um, so here, plains, the use of plains is really weird, especially aridity. So I think the same word exists in English. It's when it's really dry. So here the waves, yes, because what they do is a plane, like in English. You would assume that they are looking back at the at the land, but actually they can't because they just said they have passed so many waves that the land already behind them must have had disappeared. Okay, so they don't know because they're facing the other direction. They're facing towards the horizon, where the wide um, stretches of sea is. So talking about dry plains, it's an antithetic image, um, which suggests that it's really um, really light, really aggressive light, very flat, and that evokes that makes their mind or the mind of the narrator think about desertic plains. And so here and so here we can see that the characters I've lost track of where they are because they don't know if they can see the land or not because they are facing the other side. And even the narrator says it should have disappeared or it must have had disappeared. So they are alone in the middle of the waves and they're abandoned. Les abandonnant au milieu des vagues. Abandoning them in the middle of the waves. And so they're completely lost. They mix what they see with their different senses. And not only that, but the sentences end with à laquelle ils s'encourageaient l'un l'autre par des cris exaltants. So their migration, they encouraged each other with exalted cries, with bad literal translation. Um, so they this so here they like there's this pleasure of disorientation of playing with the waves and playing with death and the pleasure of playing with death. Um, Quite simply because even as readers, we don't really know where we are, and we have to pay close attention to the words, the descriptions, and and the characters themselves see things that are they are not supposed to see, and they mix up water with uh, a a water expense with a desertic expense. On top of that, being in the middle of the waves, oppressing waves, they yell at each other and they push each other to keep going. Um, so yeah, so I wanted to talk about this extract because I think it's really uh, I think it's really rewarding to read something like that, and to that can be confusing if you go a little too fast. But if you take your time and you pay close attention to the words and the description, then all of a sudden you feel the same feelings that the kids are feeling, and or the young people, they're not kids. Um, so you really get to have that feeling where imagining what they see, um, trying to make sense of the similes, the metaphors, the images that can be a little bit confusing sometimes. And and so in the end, it doesn't really matter because you this passage is page 91 out of 170 something. So in the end, what matters is not really if the kids are going to make it back alive. What matters in the end is just the experience of what the characters are experiencing. And and I think, and that's really interesting because sometimes I have a hard time, especially when I listen to people talk about art or literature or something like that. A lot of people, some people will say, um, the subject matter doesn't matter, it's more the stylistic expression. And it's not always very clear, even with the examples that people give, or, you know, like if you take Flaubert, for example, the subject matter, the story is interesting in and of itself. And so when he says I wrote a book about nothing, it's not really true. It may have been true in the context of the time, but still the story is kind of it's kind of like a romance plot or something like that. Whereas here, the story doesn't matter in itself because we know how it's gonna end. It's a Gothic story. I don't want to spoil you the book, but it's not great. Um, and we know that they're not going to drown because it's the middle of the book, so it's very unlikely that one of them would die. It's a love triangle, so they meet in the beginning, they have to finish in the end. And and so yeah, for that very thing, I really enjoyed reading this book because it gave me a clear idea of what it means not to focus on the subject, the story, the subject matter, and more to focus on the style and the relationship between storytelling and style. And so very often it's described as being antagonistic, whereas I think it's quite complementary. Uh, okay, I think I'll just stop here because it's been 49 minutes. All right. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope I didn't stumble too much or repeated the same words. That's only my job. Thank you very much. Goodbye.